that everything is true and nothing is true. So it
Mm.
really becomes about the observer and the perspective of the observer of what works best for them. I enjoy the heady super sphere traveling the cosmos, but right here I'm having a very human experience. I think
Yeah.
that if spirituality doesn't serve humanity in a real level, and also the psychology of oneself on a real level, has become misplaced.
So tell me about chaos, magic, and then also the voodoo. I think that's something that scares people. It's viewed in the dark. It's viewed as
Sure.
something that,
Yeah.
ooh, stay away from. So let's
Right.
explore this. Welcome, and thank you for being here today. I have John Jones. John, he is the Chief Strategic Officer of WTF Comic Books with me today, which stands for World Transmission Frequency, maybe a bit different. He has been focusing on the occult, on Vodic and magic practices his whole life, but his focus has been to strip away any of the dogma of it and distill the practices into practical application as a practitioner. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. This goes along with our podcast so well about demystifying the mystic and making it practical.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like that is what you have done in your life and also applied it into practical lives. So tell us a bit about who you are and what has brought you on this journey.
Okay. Yeah, I am John Jones. I've been focused in the spiritual realm because I don't think that there's a real separation between our higher selves and what have been claimed to be our lower selves or our physical selves. And that the practice of the integration of those things really comes across when we start messing around with things like the subconscious, things like meditation, things like breathing exercises, focusing our ability to change our brain waves and realizing on a larger level that everything is connected and that we are not separate from the universe in itself, and that even our very imagination is an activity of the universe and probably one of the greatest activities for utilizing the energies of the universe to manifest and create, since we are made of the same things that make stars.
Mm.
So, in these creative potentials of self coming to the full realization and the imagination and the assumption of the energy so that we might find those alignments through keys that have been laid throughout all mysticism and all religious practices, that we're able to open those doors that are both exclusively and inclusively meant for us and the collective. So when we start to do the practice and take the walk and take the journey on the manifestation and the synchronicities that we see that allow for us to be in this human school as a spiritual being begin to escalate and to multiply very quickly.
I like that. You talked about keys. And this is maybe something that's interesting because we hear about this. It seems very mystical. It seems very, out there. Can I see them? Can I touch them?
Sure.
Not really. So what does that mean? Like, what has that meant for you, accessing the keys?
So, again, going back to stripping things of their dogma, there are direct dogmas in some religions that give exact habits that you're supposed to assume and exact things that you're supposed to do to be able to achieve the certain states that you would like to be in.
Yes.
What I like to do is find the key practices, the actionable practices, and much like a
Okay.
scientist, take them as a hypothesis while still taking on the collective identity of the dogma or religion that it's in, but also being able to detach from that dogma or religion to just do that practice for at least 30 days. And then if I do that practice, actionable practice for 30 days, and it does something to shift or creates a new energetic ripple within me, it becomes one of the legacy keys that I'll put down in a notebook that becomes one of the practices that I'll continue to practice regardless if I'm a part of that religion or not, or that mysticism practice or not.
Oh, I like that. So instead of taking something and saying, I need to be I am now this is my whole identity, this is who I am, this is what I believe, you go within those practices, take an actual physical like routine or something to do. You do it for 30 days. Does it work or not? Keep it, don't keep it.
Right. It does work for me as a specific. So
Yes. Yeah,
what
yeah.
might work for me might not work for somebody else. That's why in, the grand scale of all the contrast and all the different things that are expressed here as human consciousness, as spiritual consciousness, that everything is true and nothing is true. So it
Mm,
really becomes about the observer and the perspective of the observer of what works best for them. Some people might be totally spiritually tuned in and have amazing manifestation and other clear powers and have no practices at all. And that is just as grand and amazing and blessed to me as someone who has a very specific monkhood that they are totally enwrapped in their dogma or practice. And when you become ultimately observant of yourself and your beliefs and of the world's contrasts and beliefs, and you become all accepting, and that it no longer matters what church you stepped into or what holy ground, that you can believe that is holy and be within that as well, while also knowing your own boundaries and domain. I think that becomes where the biggest power and the biggest revelations of self really start to come in. And I think a lot of what we're going through is that right now, as far as the discovery of true self as we
yes.
start to express it to one another.
That's very interesting because what you're saying is you don't really hold on to anything. You accept everything, you accept everyone.
Mhm.
And as someone who was in a very strict religion and grew up that way and then let go of it, what I felt is that I had nothing to hold on to anymore. I it was a Christian-based religion, and I just threw everything out. I had to then decide, do I believe in God? Do I believe in Jesus? And for me, because it was so tight, I threw everything out and then had to build that back up again. But that's a very scary place to be to because we're holding on so tight and then holding on to nothing, but you're doing it a different way. You're kind of playing with it in a sense. And
Right.
so did how did you come into this practice? Did you were you always like this? Do you come from a set religion or a set dogma or belief system?
I mean, so I've always been like this. I had a moment of rediscovery about my African heritage when I was in high school. That kind of started me down the road of deeper spiritual practice along the lines of voodoo, to that Yoruba, which is the original religious practice of Nigeria. So I started studying very heavy in that and started seeing that a lot of their practices are about the internalization of nature forces within the body and how they are as holy spirits or gods that normally are externalized in stories and cultural stories, but in the classical sense that they are the representation of our energetic bodies that we have going on, and they each have a specific name that we can call on. And so they become an internal council to be able
Mm,
to both regulate the body and regulate the reality as we tap into them. And in so doing that, you also find that there's a lot of crossover throughout all of these neural networks and root networks throughout the religions of the world that are all borrowing from each other in their mystic classes. And so, the more that I learned, the more I got curious about, well, what did they do in Egypt? What do they do with the Kabbalah? What is El? What are, and you start asking the questions and, you start finding the information. So it became much more of a science, a quantum science practice for me. And around the same time, quantum science started to really be prevailing about what the mind really is capable of. And
yeah.
now I think it's almost mainstream as far as the law of attraction and law of all the laws and stuff that have been well
Yes.
published that the zeitgeist is people automatically on a lot of levels think this way or have accepted that thinking this way is okay. Of course, some of the dogmatic practice are still very separatist on these things, but in a beingness of loving all humans, regardless of them needing to agree with me. Even those who are separatists on these things, I might not speak it out loud to everyone, but I can
Yes.
still accept and people can still see my actions in what it is and how it is that I treat people. And they don't need to know my internal practices.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been doing this all of my life. Yes, I've been experimenting, trying to figure out how to become a better spiritual human, and how to be active in this world for, my main goals of peace, of healing the earth, of loving people, of communicating well, of also being able to heal myself and
Mm.
transcend boundaries that I might have set up that are hard roads. So all of those things come into the practice, so it's not all heady up here. I enjoy the heady super sphere traveling the cosmos, but right here I'm having a very human experience. And I think
Yeah.
that if spirituality doesn't serve humanity in a real level, and also the psychology of oneself on a real level, that it's also, for me, it has become misplaced.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you also mentioned coming from love and acceptance, which I think, I have not studied every single one of the mystical arts or religions or ways of thinking, but the ones that I have, all of them are rooted in love. And for me, love is also acceptance. For me to love someone fully, I actually do have to accept them. I might not like or agree with, but there it is accepting them as a human and them having their experience and them having their process. And um I like how you said that because that makes it very practical. Like you said, I can think a lot of things and I can believe a lot of things, but how am I acting? How is this influencing my everyday life on a practical level?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I find that the ascendancy sometimes can take away the practicality of how we interact on a community level. And I
Mm.
think that you have to have the roots of the thing, of the physical, to be able to sprout the fruits of the thing, of the etheric. And so they work in tandem. However high you grow up, you have to grow downward to be able to understand both levels and the fullness of yourself, of both sides of yourself.
Well, I like that. How would you describe that? The 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 highness and the lowness. I know that for me it's as I travel up and explore the higher realms, I also have to accept the darker realms of myself and actually integrate those and
Yeah.
be okay in playing with them and actually getting the power and the good out of those dark places too. But for you were saying like in the community, how does that look for you integrating both, like going as deep down as you do up?
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of practice of ignoring quote unquote bad emotions or bad
Yeah.
energies in a lot of the field as of the last 20 years. And I think that some of the greatest work that can actually be done is coming to accept personal traumas and generational traumas,
Mm.
and maybe not even traumas, but just like the weather, not every day is going to be a sunny day, but it's still okay to accept the passing of the clouds. And being able to do that on a personal level is one thing, but also being able to do that again in the acceptance field of other people are going through things. Other people might not be in a position where they're able to go to dimensional or etheric realms or take the time to meditate every day or anything like that, but they're just as divine. They're just as sparked as everyone else, and being able to sit and hear their stories, even if it invokes in you those darker energies or negative energies, as people call it. I say that all energies are valid and that all energies are a part of the compass of what we have to express. And that if they're coming up in you, ignoring them doesn't solve the problem. It's much like a cut or something like that. So the more you ignore it, the more that it has the possibility of doing other things. So being present in the world energy, of what everybody's going through wherever you walk. And then, sure, walking with your light there. But if you're feeling something or you have something that's going on because of something that you see or because personally it's something you've got going on, accepting that it's okay, accepting that we are again physical beings, accepting that we're here on borrowed time. We have a destination point, no matter how it is in this physical body. And I think a lot of people get caught up between the paradox of an eternal soul, eternal energy body, and then the physical aspect of that, and what that means and how that integrates. And really, is we're just here, a flash in the pan, to be able to express the divineness for a little while. But with that divineness, the reason that we're also here is to experience all those other things, and that those depths, the ability for us to go down into those depths and feel those depths and feel all the other pieces, allows for the heights to exist. So the
Mm.
further you're able to fill the depths and again, I don't want to call it bad or negative, but the more you're able to feel what might feel heavy to many and transmute it and put it
Yes.
into the art forms and put it into the expressions and allow for the storytelling to come back to the communities and the fire
Mm.
circles and the original ways that we dealt with hardship, which still made
Yeah.
it into light, which is a part of the reason that we have the imagination and the expression that we have. I believe that's the higher that we can soar. So yeah, I'm not real big on uh, disembodying or detaching from the nitty-gritty of anything. A lot of people are like, "Well, don't look at that. The more you focus on that, the more it's gonna show up on you," and it's like, that sounds great. And, part of me rediscovering my African traditions is my ancestors were slaves here in this
Yeah.
country. And
Yeah.
so that's nothing I can shy away from. And so it's not that I'm looking at it because I think that more of it's going to come into being. But if you don't look at the things that were a
Yeah.
part of histories like that, they have more possibility of showing up again. And so it's more so being able to see, how did they survive this? How did
Yeah.
they embody this? Who are the leaderships that were here? How does it still exist within me? And how is it
Mm.
that I get to express it in the most positive ways possible, while also still dealing with the generational traumatic aspects of that, also on this conscious tangent that I'm on? And how do I relate to other African Americans who are like, "You're just a crazy person," And I'm like, "Well, here, let's take these aspects and pick it apart and slow it down, and let me just give you some of the keys that allow me to come into embodiment of what I can really want to do, instead of allowing, you know, other traumas to intercede." And that's part of that psychology work, right? It's part of the
Mm.
ability to go into communities and really give them the keys to their own peace. And if that doesn't happen, then yes, all those heavy feelings will create more of what they see, but you have to be able to deal with them to be able to heal them. You have to be able to go
Mm.
into them in yourself to be able to really do something with them. Otherwise, the continuation passes down another generation.
Yeah, be able to look at it, and because, it's easy to say I accept it, but I think accepting it is even just seeing it, because when something is so dark and something is so heavy inside of us, it can be very hard to look at, because then to identify with it, like, no, I am a good person. Like, that is not part of me. I notice it within my own family dynamics, where it's very easy for us to see someone else's shortcomings, but then to acknowledge, well, I have that same thing inside of me. That's another step. That's very hard to do. And for some, fortunately, so for some people, that's impossible to do. I've just noticed this in my own family
Mhm.
dynamic. But if I can't, because it's one thing to say, "Oh, I accept it in them," but I don't have that at all. We're still creating this shield of saying, like, I have the capacity to be and hold everything. I am everything. Like you said, I I know everything and I know nothing, but I am everything and I am none of it as well. To be
Right,
able to hold those 2 things and say, "Yeah, of course, like, I am the slave and I'm the slave owner."
right, right. Yep.
That's a hard part. I saw a comedian talking about this, about past lives, and he put himself as, like, "I'm black, I can't believe in reincarnation, because if I do, then now I'm the slave owner," and he makes a joke about it in such a clever way,
Yeah,
but it is such a powerful way to realize it's not just he's using his heritage, but for all of us, it's like that. Like, I have been the oppressor and the oppressed
right, right,
in small ways in this life and generationally. Like, how can I embrace that old, transmute it, and then use it?
right. Yeah, when you
So how
start
do you
speaking to those higher levels,
yeah.
I mean, when you start speaking to those levels of people imagining that, again, I feel like there's a hard line in a lot of things of people saying, "Well, practically, what are we doing today about the situations that still exist from the thing?" And so
Yeah.
it's I think that it's on a lot of the people who are able to envision what it looks like to be oppressed and oppressor, to be able and have been there, have lived it, have experienced it on a lifetime level, to then go into, I feel like there's a calling to go into scenarios where you still see the dynamics of
Mm.
oppressed and oppressors. And even if everybody doesn't get that multi-lifetime
Mhm.
experience that that person is walking with because of their ability to channel a certain thing, that they're going to go in and say, "Hey, here's the things that I would like to address based on my lifetimes as both of these. I
Mm.
need you, sir, compassionately, the person I've identified in this lifetime who's being an oppressor. I need you to do these kind of things from here on out, because what you're doing is oppression. And here's why, based on someone who knows." And then oppressor, the oppressed, "Hi, I'm here to aid you and point out how the community could come together and be stronger, how we can make a better collective here, how we can make our own system here to be able to pull away from any oppression and become stronger on our own, or if necessary, rebellion, because we're only here for a short time and get the oppressor all the way and live from your spiritual truth for what it is that you're here to do and why you've been called forth into this physical body. You know, based on that scenario, that's where I feel called towards a lot of the time. If there are oppressors and I've lived multiple lifetimes and been both, then it's on me to both go talk to the oppressor if I'm able
Yeah.
to reach them. You know, most of them are on private jets these days, so we shall see. And, you know, and if I was the oppressed, I don't always I think for some, it is the possibility of imagining their life in a different domain and channeling in that life through their creative process and things, and that they might break a cycle just from stepping into the trueness of themselves and their creativity. And then on a whole 'nother level where starvation is happening, war is
Right.
happening,
Right.
maiming, rape, these other things are happening. You can't tell those people to that the thing you're doing wrong is to meditate and imagine a better world on a practical level. When there are billions of dollars being spent to destroy them or hurt them or maim them, and I think at that time it takes those who know that they're an eternal energy of light to say, "I'm willing to put my body on the line to change this path of where people are being destroyed in this way,
Mm.
because they deserve a right. I'll speak to it. I'll use my voice to it. I'll use my music to it. I'll do documentaries about it. I'll spend my time. I'll speak to these people. I'll try to get them out of this situation, whatever it
Mm.
takes because everyone is connected and in the mass consciousness of things it's so important that we preserve the preciousness of the consciousness that we have, which is the highest value that is on the planet above dollars, above gold, above everything is the ability for humans that have these experiences, these huge emotional experiences, to be alive to tell their stories so that
Yeah.
we can learn and advance and truly rise.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing you say is taking action in whatever way we can. If it is meditating and holding a higher vibration to ripple out into the world, and that's the level you're at, sure. If you are a community leader, talking, connecting, and I think I know for myself, I've felt this at different times. Like, I'm a no one, I can't impact certain things. But for me, I have decided and I have seen the way that I can and taken action. And I think for us to remind ourselves that we do have an impact, even if it is just holding the vibration of love. If I'm one person holding that, holding the vibration of coherence, of peace, and that does make an impact. But I want to speak to the other people too, the ones that think my small action is not going to, how can I actually speak to the man on the jet?
Hmm.
And I really, really do believe that if you feel in your heart that that is the thing you need to do and you see the vision of it, it might be these tiny little steps that you take that accumulate and energy, then people, resources, like all the types of energy come behind you. And that impact is powerful. We see it in history all the time where this one little voice, this one little child did the thing, and now we're making documentaries and movies about it 50, 70 years later.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
be that person.
Yeah. Absolutely.
However it looks for you, you do have the power. You do have the power to make a ripple, an impact, a huge change.
Yep. And I heard you say that you're a no one, and I will say that you are the one, right? We're all one. And we're all expressions of the divine consciousness. So no one is no one. Anybody that lights a candle can light another candle. And so even that meditative act is a part of the shift. Even you making
Mm,
a choice to meditate and say, these are my intentions for the world begins the keys that open the door to the new synchronicity of you potentially walking into the person on the private jet or whoever in whatever scenario and having the words for them at that time because you're centered and because you are a one, the one, to speak to them, to speak to their oneness and bring
yeah.
them to their humanity to say, "Ha, I didn't think of it that way, or you've impacted me in some way, or I'm gonna shift some of
Mm,
my decisions from here on about how it is I'm active on XYZ. It might not always
yeah,
happen, but it only takes a couple of those scenarios, you know? I
yeah,
believe that human consciousness wakes up and that we shift, we continue to shift towards a more accepting and peaceful planet for all, you know?
yeah, I like that. Okay, I want to shift the direction a bit. When I
Absolutely.
first met you and I heard about you were talking about chaos magic,
Yes.
and we had a conversation about this, and I was so intrigued because, I'm into all sorts of things and feel a strong connection to magic and have dabbled in chaos, well, the ideas of chaos and entropy, and like you said, the metaphysical, the
Yeah.
physics, studying
The
physics itself.
primordial ooze. Yes.
Yes, and how the building blocks of our world, as science starts to uncover more of that, it is so intertwined with the metaphysical or the spiritual, or because that's just, for me, I think that magic is science not explained yet in a lot of ways. I think that all of it is math. I think all of it is science, and we can, and maybe we don't want to explain it all. There is something about the magic, the mysticism, and the unexplainable that we love as well. But bringing it into a practical, so tell me about chaos magic, and then also the voodoo. I think that's something that scares people. It's viewed in the dark. It's viewed as
Sure.
something that,
Yeah.
ooh, stay away from. So let's
Right.
explore this, please.
Yeah, so I would like to start with the voodoo.
Okay.
So voodoo and Yoruba, pretty much any African tradition, especially for America,
Mhm.
that when this kind of spins off of our last conversation, when African slaves sang in their own songs or practiced their own religions or gathered in private or read books, that was demonized because
Mm,
they needed people who would just do what they said, not anybody who had their own focus or energy.
yes.
And so if they were going off their own religion and their own gods, they'd be put in a direction of what their gods had taught them about how it is that they're supposed to be represented as kings and queens in this world. And that would
Mm,
not fit the scale of where they were at as far as the consciousness that was being implanted on them as slaves. So voodoo, through even after slavery ended, was demonized because it was a powerful initiate in the culture to be able to bring back the empowerment to the class that still needed to be lower at that time. And so horror movies, horror films, again, big investors used it as the scary thing in the background of the African community that was related, they wanted to say it was related to the devil, even though if you go through the Udo Ifa, which is the holy book of Yoruba, which gave birth to, voodoo, um, all of the beings in the book are very human, very motivated by how it is to be in balance with the community. There are some tricksters and there's some different characters, but there is no essential good or evil. They're all motived based on what human consciousness would be motived on. And that's why they relate so closely to humans.
mm,
So yeah, with voodoo, those ideas were scaled to take away from the actual aspects of if there is a lion that is attacking your community, you're allowed to make sure that lion doesn't attack your community anymore. Also, within that community, you want to do good works in the community. So you have the good and the bad side of anything, but the justice is on the human to express it in
mm,
relationship to the spirit that they're in relation to. And so that is a scary aspect for operating systems that need people to be in certain places that they're going to harm them if they don't, because voodoo allows for you to say, no, you're a lion that's trying to attack my community and you no longer get to do that. And that's a scary thing. So like the Haitian
mm,
Revolution, it was very voodoo centric when they threw out the French. And that was based on them saying we deserve our own freedom and nobody gets to rule us anymore. And so they took on
yeah.
a first world nation based off of the religious aspects that were there. Now
Mm,
with chaos magic, I'll shift the scope.
okay.
With chaos magic, I was introduced to chaos magic through a book called Apophenia, which was written by Peter Carroll. He also wrote Psychonaut, and he's written This Is Chaos Magic, and he's written. He has a long legacy of books. He's pretty much the prominent person in the field around chaos magic, and its approach again is that everything is true and nothing is true. So in chaos magic, it's kind of that basis of centering the aspects of your practice on who you are and what you're here to discover for you. And that in chaos magic, that the idea of chaos in itself is not what people have classically thought of chaos, that it's just a bunch of, craziness.
Yeah.
That chaos is more on the chaos theory level of a primordial ooze that out of chaos, out of the initiation of chaos, that there is all of the order that we see in the world and all of the disorder that comes out of the world. But chaos is the fusion point, the ignition point of both of those things. And
Mm.
so in chaos, it is described that you don't have to pray to a specific god. If you, for whatever reason, found that the Incredible Hulk was a more entertaining god for you, and that you put your belief system, you create an entire belief system around the Incredible Hulk, that when you prayed, specifically the person who had that affinity with Incredible Hulk, when you prayed to the Incredible Hulk and you said, Incredible Hulk, come save me now, that your magic would have more power for you than you paying any attention to anything else that's out there, because you
Mm.
exclusively have the affiliation for it and how it is that it rises, and that you can take that and manifest it into anything that has to do with the individual. And that's what they not prescribe, but what they offer to you to experiment with. That's different than other spiritual practice. A lot of other spiritual or magical practices have very exact practices and rituals that you have to do every time, and that you
Yeah.
need to fit into the scale of what somebody else has gone forth and done before based off of their studies and activity and the signs in the sky. And so chaos magic will have you do experiments that are paradox to a lot of those things, that you don't have a set time to do the practice. You don't have to do anything under the full moon. In fact, it's encouraged that you do it randomly. You want to play with things more than you're serious about them. And so
Yeah.
Apple is much more a psychology book about how you play with these aspects of what you've normally done. And if you want to see different things than what you've normally done, you can't continue to do what you normally do or even approach it from the normal way that you would normally look at it. And instead, how can we break you from what you normally are so that you can have a totally different experience without, well, psychonaut includes a lot of drug use. But as far as Apofinion, it's all psychology, it's all meditation practices to shift your perspective, to give you a new outlook on things and have new practice that comes from you. And then you from that new chaotic format that your shifting body is not its normal space, you get to see new orders and new disorders that come and rise out of your magical practice.
I like that. New orders and disorders.
Yeah, yeah. Orders and disorders. Absolutely.
Well, because out of the disorder is actually like where more order comes from,
Right.
right? Isn't that like sometimes you need things to break down, and in that idea of chaos or it not being exactly how we want it to be, that's the force and the energy propulsion that is actually needed to like create something in a new direction,
In
correct?
my mind, that's usually the real magic, right?
Yeah.
It's not the orderly and it happens just as I see it or imagine it. It because even in those practices where you have very script things or you're doing a subconscious practice before dream time, it's always offered, okay, after you've assumed the energy, let it go and let the universe fulfill how it is. So you're still
Yeah.
tapping into this unknown mysticism, mystic thing of, oh, there's going to be some kind of magic that comes in and I don't need to worry about it anymore. And so with chaos, it's just a very form script of, I'm going to do exact things to make chaos happen. And I'm going to walk around in this new disheveled energy. And then, wow, that was interesting. And I've found it to be, if not as impactful, more impactful sometimes to shake it up like that and do a little bit of chaos magic to have a whole bunch of things shift real quick. And then people will be like, well, how did you end up here? Man, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me.
I just want to ask you, what is the last time you did this? Like, how did this actually look in your life? But
About
maybe
3
that,
months yeah, about
yeah,
3 months
you
before
can?
I met Steven. So, I was,
Really?
like, deep into a practice, and then I got approached by a big money group that said, "We need you to find a guy who has a fund and it's the ability to trade crypto and do money trades and is really well known and really well off and really focused," and I was like, "Okay." I had already done the
Yeah.
practice, but then these things came together, and then it was about 2 weeks after getting the question from them that I found Steven. And then Steven, in our first conversation, we started getting to talk about magic. It's a business call. And I'm on the call with six other people, and I start getting into a talk with Steven about Saint Germain. And, everybody's like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? And we're like hitting it off. And he's like, you know what? You're like a real brother to me, real spirit brother to me. I'm like, yeah, man, I love to carry on our spiritual conversation later, but yeah, let's do some business stuff too. So we set the two apart, and I called him later, and I was like, yeah, I really enjoyed more than the business stuff. I really enjoyed our talk about wizardry and like, magic and higher realms and stuff like that. And I'd love to grab a deeper call on that with you whenever you're available. And he was like, actually, we got a meditation group that's forming, and there's three of us right now. And yeah, if you're ever interested, I was like, I'll be totally what I'm looking for. And so again, all the things happened. There was a bunch of shifts. I'm looking for a nondescript thing, like you say, walking into a billionaire on a plane, like we've been
Yeah.
talking about. It's kind of that thing of like walking into this next door of total abundance and what the next chapter of life looks like, and how can I have these huge impacts on the planet and become one of these people who are able to go out and just set up these communities and nation build and all these things. And then from that chaotic dreaming, it walks in the door. And now we're like on the path to have these things actually manifest.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I tell it, I can say that here. I'm sure this is going to go to a lot of people one day. But you know, if I say it to a friend that's close to me, that's known me my whole life,
Yes.
they look at me like, what are you talking about? And so it's good to be in circles now where it's not only heard, it's
Yeah.
believed and it's seen and it's mirrored, and people are on
Yes.
similar journeys. And I feel like my community is opening up in that way, a lot of ways, of people
Mm.
who are able to hear it and concretize it in that way. But yeah, that was the last time I had done a chaotic experiment to see what would happen next was, about 3 months. And that's been about 6 months now.
Yes.
So we're now on the 96th day of the meditations that we're doing there, and we've got great stuff in the background with the business stuff that's cooking, and I'm getting to do wonderful interviews like this. So I just feel like everything that's kind of come out of about 6 months ago is now really starting to coalesce into. You thought it was all chaotic and your world was just shaking up. No, these are the new
Yeah.
orders that you're supposed to be a part of. This is how you're supposed to be representing yourself. This is, and you just
Mhm.
comes together in a little bit of time.
I love that. Yeah, that's how we met, through Stephen, through those meditations,
Yeah,
those
channels,
astral
channels and meditation.
journeys.
Yes,
Yeah, channels. Yeah, I think we're astral traveling every single day.
absolutely.
Something like that. Okay, so for people listening and they're like, "Okay, this sounds cool, chaos, disrupting." What are some practical things that some people can do to disrupt, to create the chaos, to you mentioned some things, you said doing things in a different way than you've done before. Is there like a prescriptive way to live an unprescripted life?
I would say so. First, I would always point to people who have been out there a lot longer than me that have really kind of paved the pathway in that way for me. So
Yeah.
Peter Carroll again is the author
Yeah.
that I return to pick up some of his books because that's where I started. And then one of the key practices that I've kind of found out of one of those books is that I've kind of concretized for myself is when manifesting or when bringing something into the imagination to manifest the entire scale. I imagine the positive side of whatever it is that I want to manifest in my right hand. And then I imagine the negative side of that same thing. So, what could go wrong? What could go right? And I usually softly press them together as I imagine them. So that they overlap and that the energy is kind of like two magnets that are pushing away. So I take the negative and the positive of this is the worst it could be, this is the best it could be. And I put them together so that I can see the wholeness of everything as if it was on one coin, two sides of one coin. And as that energy intensifies in that magnetic pulse, I'll softly, through my own consciousness, elect to raise one up. So sometimes you need the worst case scenario, or what is seems to be the worst case scenario. So sometimes you need for someone to go away and you don't need to work it out with them. So the best would be, oh, we work it out, we make peace with it. the worst would be, "I need a divorce, and I don't want this anymore." I would elect my left that time, but I try to see as much as I can as a human, the entire observation of what is I'm manifesting, and then softly elect, and that small action of subconscious bringing together both sides and then electing for 30 seconds on the right side of how good this is about to be, and then forgetting it, like, right afterwards, going to do something like drinking tea or picking up a newspaper or changing the channel, and then I'll quickly see ripples that come out of that that are
Mm,
directly related to the thing that I needed to focus on. I I also call it, like, another way to pray, 'cause I believe that it's an overlap to praying as well. You know, I think that you can pray about entire things of, here are the things are my challenges, here are the things that I know can go right, and then, ending the prayer with, the blessing part of where you want to go while addressing all the parts. But I think the big thing is pulling together the paradoxes instead of trying to keep one away from
yes,
pulling together all the pieces of self, I think is
yeah,
really important, and also in the Apophenion, they address your emotional bodies, so I think a lot of people run from, again, their sadness, their anger, those parts of themselves while highlighting the happy parts, and so in the
mhm,
Apophenion, they tell you to get a journal and become knowing of your emotional selves while also being detached, and by that I mean that they'll have you write down the names of who is your anger? What's the name of your anger body? What's the name of your sadness body? What's the name of your happiness body? What's the name of your abundance body? What's the name of your sexual body? So that you can be better connected to them and call them out by name for you. And that you can also imagine them around a council. So when you have to make decisions, you can give them the question as you, the observer, and then have them discuss it amongst themselves and take a vote and help you with your direction. And now you have your inner counsel that you can easily speak to and call them by name. And so I found that to be a really powerful practice that, usually would be a split personality type of diagnosis. But in this kind of balanced format of I am trying to achieve a certain thing, a certain outcomes to be able to make my best decisions, you're really just going into a deep meditation within yourself to be able to visualize the kingdom within you and sit with your holy counsel and honor all the aspects of yourself. And then when you come back to the practical world, you're making really
yeah,
good decisions because you've taken the time to really speak to all the different pieces that you've been able to express wherever they exist.
yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. I really also like you saying holding the opposites because I've noticed, and I want to talk about imagination and visualization too, because you talk about that a lot. And I think imagination is such a powerful tool. But in that, you're just speaking to something I've noticed recently. I have a strong imagination and I have a strong visualization practice. And in the past, I have visualize the positive, but not necessarily the negative. And I've noticed the last just few days, I had this transition. I've come back from Mexico and I'm needing to make some big decisions in my life. And I've noticed I'm just focusing on worst case scenario. I'm like mitigating all these worst case scenarios. And I was thinking to myself, why am I doing that? And the tendency was to push that away and focus on the positive. But it's actually, I'm liking this because it is a natural thing for us. It's not even natural, it's healthy to know what the worst case scenario is and to prepare.
Right, right.
So to hold both and then that feels more balanced and it feels more real and practical and also doable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then you can
yeah,
softly elect, and so that's my favorite part. You
softly
between
elect.
between the 2, you don't have to make a forceful election of, "This is what we're doing now, this is where we're going." It's a
Yeah.
I recognize both of the powers here. I can feel the energy that's built within the wholeness of this thing that I can see clearly, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
softly elect. I'm gonna softly elect that this is it. I'm gonna hold that soft election for 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna forget
Mm,
it, and I'm gonna move on with my day because I've
I
now
love
made my
that.
yeah, made my decision. And, yeah, I do
And
talk
then
about your go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, and also the forgetting about it, that allows our brain to disconnect from ruminating.
Right.
So when we do the steps of bringing them together, softly elect for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and then stop and let it go, that's freedom right there for a
That's
lot of
freedom.
us whose minds are just like, I'm keep
Yep.
thinking about it. And you're like, no, I don't need to. Now I'm trusting, I'm giving it up to chaos. to
Yeah,
life because it's going to do its thing anyway. I don't have control.
yeah, you've tapped your subconscious, and now what you do is allow for the workings that are behind the scene to do the work. You know, when you plant a seed in a field, you don't go back and, dig up the seed to make sure the roots are growing. Once it's in the ground, the roots are growing, you know it's growing. You expect it to grow. You
Yeah.
might water it, keep it clean, make sure it has a good growth path, and you might maintenance that once a week. Much like our thoughts, we should maintenance it once a week until it grows on its own. But we don't need to
Okay.
continue to dig up the seed and make sure it's rooting and wait for the sprout to come up. When the sprout comes up, make sure that the leaves and count every leaf every time to make sure it goes. We're overdoing it, then we're more likely are going to ruin whatever it is that we're trying to put in the process.
Yeah.
So, and going to the imagination subject,
Yes.
yes, with imagination, there's an author, Neville Goddard, who I've read a lot of, and Neville is really keen on the aspect that the imagination is God, that there isn't a separation between the imagination and God or anything like that, that the imagination is your own holy expression of God in your life. And so whatever you imagine and that you generate the energy and you come of the assumption of that energy will be what's created in your reality. So if you spend the time to imagine, much like we're talking about, I've kind of made it into some of my own practices with other practices that are out there. But if you spend the time to imagine and then softly elect anything, that's what will be attracted to you after you assume the energy. So he doesn't really have the practices of the forgetting. That's something that I pulled from chaos magic and other practices of
Mhm.
intentionally forgetting whatever you're focused on. He to be a little bit more religious on it and be in the faith and consumption that you can think about it every day and then walk in the faith of it. I think he's still trying to get to the same points of forgetting about it when he does walk in the faith, but he doesn't put it in those exact words. And that's really the focus that I've embodied as well. I'm a real big believer on the imaginary foundation that connects everything.
Mm.
That this holographic or imaginary universe is responding to everything that our I Magi Nation is
Ooh.
producing. So, I Magi Nation is really where we all exist. And we just happen to correspond here on a physical plane. That our dream reality is almost more prevalent than our real reality for
Yeah.
being able to have the larger aspects of the bigger shifts in life. So I think that's why I talk about the imagination so much because it's a key component to being able to do almost any of these magical practices or cosmic travels or channels that, yes, a lot comes to you, but you still have to have the visual board that allows for it to flow through. And I
Mm.
think it's wholly important that people really master that. That's why, although I have other real jobs, my main focus right now is the comic book company, and then
Yes.
eventually the animation company that I'm going to be making happen. Because being able to again express these stories of consciousness into unbounded imagination so other people can share in them and say, I watched this amazing animation or I picked up this amazing comic book that really hit on some key notes while also dealing with all the aspects of everything else that we deal in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
That's really where I wanna be and what I wanna do. So that's why, I'm big on especially especially adults getting back into their childlike minds and believing in, their world transmission frequency abilities to hone in, playing with reality with their imagination and doing it out of, joy because we get to be here to experience it and see how it kind of, how it relates.
I love that. I love that. Playing with life, because really that's all we're doing anyway. Remembering to not take it so seriously, to play, have more fun, creativity, imagination. Bring out the colors, the coloring.
Absolutely. Get the coloring books out.
The coloring books, exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I have really enjoyed this conversation. If people, so you're in the comic book realm
Yes.
and you are a publisher. If people are wanting to, if they have this idea, I know I talked to you about my daughter who has had the same vision of you, of comics and animation. If there are people out there who are like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this existed. This is what I want to do. This is my passion. I have a story. I have skills. Can they connect to you? Are you ready?
Absolutely,
Like,
absolutely.
what stage are you in on this?
I mean, we're right now pushing forward all of our original stories, but we're still connecting with artists. We're still connecting with storytellers. There's a big thing from Abraham Hicks, "Get ready to get ready." So we're
Yeah.
focused on continuing to get ready and building our collective. So if anybody wants to reach out, they can go to the website, WTFcomicbooks.com, and we have a submission form for anything that you'd like to offer up or any conversations that you'd like to start. And we're talking to people every day about their dreams and their focuses and how it is that on the broader scale, we can start to bring together this massive collective of creative individuals who want to get their artwork out there.
Amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Excellent. I really enjoyed this. Thank
Awesome.
you so much.
You are welcome. I really do love your insights about everything, especially the African traditions, which I don't hear much about, spoken
Mhm.
about. And even like you talking about the voodoo, that was so powerful.
Thank you for joining us and listening. If you enjoyed this content, we invite you to like and subscribe. If you're interested in energy intelligence technologies to calm yourself, regulate yourself, and start to use these technologies for your own benefit, you can follow the links below and engage.